long ago, in a far distant part of Europe, there lived a young man with his family who were very, very poor. They could barely afford to eat every day. Now, as it happened, the king of this land was fighting a great battle with the neighbouring kingdom, and he was calling up any able and willing fighters to join his army. So, the young man signed up. He agreed to fight. He agreed to become a soldier, and he fought bravely every day. He was superb with a sword. As the battle raged, as arrows rained down upon the soldiers, many to the right of him were killed. Many to the left of him were killed. And it so happened that his commander was killed in a volley of arrows. Well, a lot of the soldiers around him wanted to flee or surrender. But the young man stood up bravely and said, "No, no, listen to me, men. Listen to me. We fight for our motherland. We fight for our king. Together we can win this battle. Who is with me?" And suddenly, all the men cheered and rode into battle with a newfound determined strength, and the battle was won. They had been victorious. They had killed all the enemies, and the rest had just fled. Well, when news of this reached back to the king, he was mightily impressed. And he sent for the young man to come to the palace. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to make you a commander in my army to thank you for all your wonderful service. And if there's anything I can do to thank you further, just name it." Well, it so happened that the young man had noticed the king's daughter as he came into the palace, and he was smitten. He fell desperately in love with her. So he said to the king, "Is your daughter engaged? Is she married? Is she single? Is she..." And the king said, "Well, yes, she is single. No, not engaged. No, very much single. You see, my daughter has a strange, temperament. She has decided she will only marry for absolute love. A love so strong that it cannot be split, not even by death." The young man looks confused, and the king continues, "She has decreed, if she marries a man, and she dies, that man will be placed alive in her tomb with her." Well, the young man is quite shocked by this, and he now understands the rumours that have been going round the palace of the many suitors who come and then leave. But he is smitten with her, not just because she's beautiful, but she's also clever and witty and talented and just a really nice person. So he says, "Well, I will marry her then, but only if she agrees to be placed in the tomb with me if I am to die first." And now she's met him, she says, yes, death will not part us. So they marry. Oh, and such a wedding, a party like the palace has never seen before. There is food, there is drink, there is dancing, there is a really good time. And everything is happy, and everything is joyous. But if the story ended there, it would be a very dull story indeed. No. Unfortunately, after a few years, the beloved princess, she dies. And her body is taken and placed in a tomb. And of course, along with her, her young husband is locked in the tomb with her. In the dark gloom of the tomb, there resided the young prince, waiting next to his dead bride. There were small cracks in the mortar of the tomb, so during the day, little glimmers of light made their way in, and he could sit and watch his beloved as her skin grew tight around her skull. But at night time, when it got dark, that was when the young prince made use of the small gifts he'd been left with. He managed to sit with the loaf of bread, the candle, and the bottle of wine. And he would light the candle and nibble at the bread, trying to make it last as long as possible before he grew so hungry and ate it all, and then would wash it down with a bottle of wine and just sit there until the candle burnt down. And again during the day he would watch his bride. But then night came and the darkness, and again he would get his bread and his wine and his candle. And he would light the candle and eat his loaf of bread and drink his wine, and then fall asleep on the cold stone floor as the candle burnt out. And then the third and final night came. He had just one candle, one loaf of bread, and one bottle of wine left. He lit the candle. He ate the bread. He thought about eating half and leaving half till the next day, but was he just prolonging his misery? He drank the final bottle of wine as the candle started to burn and burn and burn down. And just as there was only a tiny glimmer of light left, the young man saw something out of the corner of his eye. A little crack in the wall, a tiny small crack. A creature moved. A snake made its way across the floor towards his bride. He thought the snake was going to nibble on her dead flesh, and he couldn't bear the thought of that. So quickly he took out his dagger and chop, chop! He cut the snake into 3 pieces and sat back down on the cold stone floor, when suddenly he saw a movement again from that same hole in the mortar, that tiny crack in the wall, and he saw another snake slither through. And this snake took one look at the cut apart snake and disappeared back through the hole in the wall. The man thought he wouldn't see that snake again, when suddenly it appeared again, but this time it had in its mouth 3 leaves, and it placed one leaf at the cut in the snake's body, and another leaf on the second cut in the snake's body, and the third leaf it placed over the snake's body. And the man watched, and the other snake watched, as suddenly the snake took a breath and suddenly was reformed, and the 2 snakes disappeared through the crack in the wall. The man looked amazed, and then he looked down and he saw the 3 leaves. He thought for a moment, these leaves could bring a snake back to life. What could they do to his beloved? So he quickly rushed to where his wife lay, and he placed one leaf on her left eye, one leaf on her right eye, and one over her mouth. And he watched, and he waited, until suddenly she took a breath and sat up. The young man was amazed. He ran towards the door and started to hammer on it and shout and yell, and the guard said, "No, no, no, we cannot let you out," until the young princess called. The guard was so confused, he ran to fetch the king. The king came, heard his daughter's voice, and demanded the guards open the door. Just as they were leaving the cell, the young man rushed back in and quickly gathered all 3 leaves, just in case. He gave these to his most faithful servant to look after for safekeeping. Well, now the princess is back to life and the young man is back with his beloved. All, you think, would be well. But the king remembers. He sent news to the young man's family that he had been placed in a tomb with his daughter to die. And, well, when the young man hears this, he thinks, "Oh no, this will be upsetting. I must take your fastest boat, your highness, and go and see my family and tell them that I am alive." And the king says, yes, certainly you must. You must both go together in my fastest ship to your family. So the ship is prepared, and the prince and the princess set sailing. But since the princess has come back to life, she's not quite the same. I mean, she's beautiful, but she's not kind anymore. She's not sweet anymore. She certainly doesn't look at her husband in the same way anymore. Now suddenly her eyes start to wander. And her eyes wander to the handsome ship's captain who's in charge of the ship. And she starts to, chat him and flirt with him. And the more time they spend together, the more they get to know each other and get to like each other. Until eventually, the young princess says, "I'm so bored of my husband. If only he was gone, we could be together." And the sea captain says, "Well, yes, but he's not gone. He's here. I mean, how would we get rid of him?" "Well, if only he had an accident, say. Like he, I don't know, fell backwards onto a dagger and over the board of the ship." And the sea captain realizes that the young princess intends to murder her husband. And he agrees to help her. So, that very night, when the princess says to her husband, "Oh, the moon is so high and so big, we should go out on deck and look at it." The two journey up onto the ship's deck, and while they're looking out to sea, the sea captain comes up behind the young prince and stabs him in the back and throws him overboard. And the young princess and the sea captain chuckle together and go off hand in hand. But all this is seen by the young prince's servant, and he wastes no time. He quickly lowers a rowboat, climbs in, rows off, picks up the young prince's body and drags it onto the boat. Now the 3 leaves were still in his satchel, and he places one on the young prince's left eye, one on the young prince's right eye, and one on the young prince's mouth, and suddenly the young prince breathes again, and the wounds in his back seal up, and the seawater splurges out of his body. The servant explains what had happened to the young prince, and together they row and row and row and row and row and row and row as fast as they can till they reach land. And when they reach land, they run and they run and they run until they find a farmhouse. They explain to the farmer what's happened, and he gives them 2 horses, and they jump on the horses and they ride and they ride and they ride and they ride till eventually they reach the king's palace again. When they do, the young prince rushes in a back way and runs up to the king's throne room. Luckily, the young princess and the captain were in no rush to make their way home, for they decided to do some sightseeing on the way before they return home. And the young princess says to her king, Oh, my poor husband, he was We were attacked by pirates and he was thrown overboard. We searched and we never found him. This brave sea captain was so brave to protect me. I wish to thank him by marrying him. Well, the young prince didn't know what the princess was planning, but he knew that he had been betrayed. So he tells the king everything that had happened. And the king says, I won't believe it. I can't believe it. There's no way my daughter would do such a thing. But when he hears soon reports of his fastest ship returning to harbour, the king instructs the prince and his servant to hide in the throne room for the king to wait his daughter. And when the ship docks, the princess is shown into the palace, and she comes into the throne room, and she goes and sees her father, and she says, oh father, oh, such a terrible thing befell us. We were attacked by pirates, and my beloved was killed and thrown overboard. Oh, how I miss him. But oh, this sea captain was so brave, so kind. He looked after me. He was so good. I wish to thank him. If only you'd grant us permission to marry. And the king thinks for a moment and says, yes, you must marry, you can marry, but you should still journey to your last husband's family and explain to them everything that's happened. Will you do that, my daughter? The princess says, yes, I will, as long as I can go with my husband. And the king says, yes, brave sea captain, you of course must go with my daughter to her old love's family. So the two go back to the ship, and once it's refreshed with supplies, they sail off. And the young prince and the servants come out from their hiding place and say, but why? You know she's lying. You know it's not true. Why have you let them go off together? And the king says, they want to be together forever. So they will be. Come with me. And the king and the prince and the servant all go up onto the battlements to see the ship, all ready to set sail, with the princess and a new captain husband. The king waves goodbye, and the prince, unseen by anyone aboard the ship, turns to the king and says, why? Why did you let them leave? You know that she's lying. Yes, says the king, but she is my daughter. She is a princess, and she wishes to be with that man for the rest of her life. And she will be. And the prince watches as that ship sets its sails and disappears off towards the horizon. And then the prince notices the ship starts to sink. And the king says, I made sure that ship was full of holes. They will be together at the bottom of the sea, together for eternity.